You know what's worse than betrayal? Hearing your own shaking voicemail played in front of your entire office. But what happened next? Nobody in that room was ready for it. My name is Rena Wallace. I am 33 years old. Before I continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. The first time I stepped into the fourth floor conference room, I was 25 and fresh out of grad school. I remember gripping a printed portfolio like it was a life vest, like the weight of those pages could keep me steady in a world where every chair looked taller than me and every person in those chairs felt carved from stone. I had walked in with a stomach full of nerves, convinced one wrong breath would expose how young I really was. Now, 8 years later, that same room felt smaller. The chairs, the same dark leather, the table, the same long glass surface, the overhead lights, the same sharp white that always felt a little too bright. But the difference was in my hands. I was holding the clicker, my presentation, my numbers, my projections, my promotion. The weight was different this time. Back then it was fear. That morning it was responsibility mixed with a quiet, almost thrilling certainty that I had earned my place at that table. The scent in the room was familiar. Dry erase markers lingering from an early meeting. Half-warm coffee sitting on coasters. A faint trace of cinnamon from a muffin someone abandoned halfway through. The projector already hummed to life, its blue glow stretching across the screen while people settled into their seats, whispered greetings, a cough, someone rustling a stack of papers, the usual sounds of a morning in the Nashville office. Jared stood against the wall pretending he was not watching me set up. He always pretended to support me, pretended to mentor me, pretended he had not taken credit for my campaign 2 quarters ago. There was always a performance aspect to him. A deliberate way he made his presence known, even when he acted like he was fading into the background. It was his favorite trick. Pretend you are harmless while you position yourself for the next strike. I adjusted my blazer, checked the pointer, and nodded to the tech guy who gave me the go-ahead. My fingers were steady, my breathing measured. I told myself I was ready. And then it happened. A beep. Loud, abrupt, sharp enough to slice through the static hum of the projector. It did not come from my laptop. Before I could blink, the room filled with my voice. Not the confident tone I had rehearsed in front of my mirror. Not the one I used in client calls. This was different. A voicemail. My voicemail. From 2 weeks earlier. Late night. My voice trembling, spilling out raw frustration I had never meant for anyone else to hear. Hi. I know it is late. I cannot believe how he twisted it all, Jared. I have worked so hard on this. And if you let him present it, again, if you pretend I was not the one who... The words echoed across the glass walls. Chairs squeaked. Someone shifted. A pen clattered to the floor. My voice kept going, vulnerable and exposed, filling the space that had once made me feel proud. Now it felt like standing under a spotlight without armor. I turned slowly. Jared was near the soundboard, smiling, his head tilted in manufactured confusion. He tapped at wires with exaggerated movements, the picture of innocent frustration. But the smirk at the corner of his mouth told a different story. He muttered something about audio bleed, shaking his head like he was helpless against some mysterious glitch. I did not move, because I had heard the soft click that morning when his phone synced to the Bluetooth system. I had watched, out of the corner of my eye, the way his fingers swiped into the shared drive, into the very folder I had labeled Q3 strategy. He thought he was clever. He thought he was careful. But he was too used to underestimating me to realize I noticed everything. He thought I would panic. He thought that voicemail would unravel me. He expected the younger version of me to reappear, the one who second-guessed herself, the one who assumed everyone else deserved the room more than she did. But I did not blink. I stepped forward, unplugged the HDMI cable, reconnected my laptop. The blue screen returned. A simple shift in color, but the entire room seemed to sense something had changed. People shifted in their seats, waiting, unsure of what would happen next. I clicked once. The file I had renamed Client Feedback Summary filled the speakers. His voice, clear, confident, careless. Yeah, I am going to tank her pitch. She is good, but not good enough. If I let her shine, the execs will back her over me. So I have got a plan. Fudge a few numbers, plant some doubt, and she crashes. I look like the guy who saved the account. The room went silent. A different kind of silence. Heavy, expectant, almost suffocating. You could feel the moment every person realized what they had heard. Realized what he had done. Eyes that had been drifting moments earlier now locked onto him with disbelief. I watched the color drain from his face. The smirk vanished. His mouth opened slightly, the way someone looks when they have been punched in a place no one else can see. He took a small step forward, trying to find words, trying to claw back control. "That is taken out of context," he stammered. I clicked again. Another recording. His voice again. The one from earlier in the week. The one I had saved because something in my gut told me I might need it one day. Who is gonna believe her? I have been here 10 years. She is just the assistant who got lucky. Let her cry. Let her complain. No one will listen. That is the beauty of it. His hands shook. Not dramatically. Just enough that you could see his confidence unraveling thread by thread. He looked at me differently now. Not with annoyance or condescension, but with fear. Because in that moment, he realized I had stopped trying to be believed. I did not need them to believe me. I only needed them to hear him. Dale stood up, the VP who rarely moved during meetings, who always sat with his arms crossed like a gatekeeper of judgment. His voice was low but firm. "Jared, outside. Now." The scrape of his chair might as well have been a thunderclap. HR followed seconds later. Jared's eyes darted to me, searching for something to say. An apology, an excuse, a warning. I would never know. I only watched as he was escorted out of the room he thought he controlled. When the door closed behind him, the entire room seemed to exhale, a subtle shift, the kind that only happens when truth finally catches up to someone who has been outrunning it for years. I turned back to the screen, my voice steady. "Let us begin." The numbers glowed on the screen in perfect stillness, a wash of cool light stretching across the table and catching the edges of untouched coffee cups. No one reached for them. No one whispered behind a hand. No one shifted papers or tapped a pen or cleared their throat the way they always did when they were preparing to dismiss me before I even began. The entire room held itself taut, suspended in a kind of quiet that felt unfamiliar, almost fragile, like even the air was waiting to see what I would do next. Except me. I stood tall with the pointer in my hand, my shoulders back, the weight of the clicker a warm anchor against my fingers. I moved through the quarterly breakdowns step by step, slide by slide, with a clarity I had never felt before. Not the shaky, eager kind of clarity I had carried in my early 20s. Something steadier, something rooted deeper than nerves or ambition. Not because the data was flawless, though I had combed through every number until I could recite them blindfolded. Not because the projections were sharp, though they were the cleanest forecasting I had ever done, but because the room, for the first time since I joined the company, was silent for the right reason. They were not doubting me. They were not waiting for a man to repeat my points in a deeper voice so they could pretend they understood them better the second time. They were not glancing at Jared for confirmation, as if his smirk carried more weight than my expertise. They were just listening. I finished the final slide, the one Jared had insisted I cut, the one he said would stir things up unnecessarily. A color-coded chart outlining the projected gains if the company invested in diversity leadership programs. A simple, powerful graph, not a manifesto, not a political stance, just numbers, but numbers that challenged the comfort of people who had built careers on sameness. Numbers that made Jared nervous enough to tell me, more than once, that it was not the right time. I left it in. I clicked through it with steady hands, and when the last figure faded from the screen, I did not ask for questions or open the floor or soften anything I had said. If you have feedback, my inbox is open. And I walked out. I walked past the long table where I used to shrink myself to fit. Past the executives sitting so still they looked like portrait paintings. Past the chair Jared always stole from me in meetings, the one he used to roll slightly forward just so he would appear closer to the screen, closer to the conversation, closer to authority. My heels echoed on the hallway floor. 4 clicks per stride. Each one sharp, clean, final. They sounded like punctuation marks on a sentence only I had the right to finish. I did not turn around to see if anyone watched me leave. I did not check to see if anyone whispered. I kept my eyes forward and let the sound fill the corridor behind me. I did not go to my desk. I went straight to HR, not to complain, not to accuse, just to confirm. I wanted it on record, my side, the truth. Everything I had documented over the past year, every screen recording saved quietly to an encrypted folder, every Slack message he conveniently missed, every calendar invite he canceled 5 minutes before I was set to present, reshuffling the agenda so he could cover my portion, and then magically become the hero in front of leadership. Melissa, the HR manager, greeted me with a tired smile. A real one, the kind people give when they have seen too much and are surprised when someone finally refuses to be quiet. She offered me a bottle of water before I said a word. She did not ask me to lower my voice. She did not tell me to wait for Jared's statement, which had been the script HR used for as long as I had worked there. She just leaned back slightly, hands folded, and listened. When I finished, she exhaled slowly and said, "You're not the first." The words stopped me. Not like a shock, more like a slow, heavy drop inside my chest. I looked at her, really looked, and she nodded with a softness that carried its own weight. "But you're the first to have proof." I let the silence sit between us for a moment. Not awkward, just honest. She typed a short note into her system, nothing dramatic, nothing drawn out. A record. My record. My voice finally logged somewhere official. Back at my desk, the team was quiet, the kind of quiet that was too deliberate, too careful. Some people looked at their screens with exaggerated focus. Others clicked their pens compulsively. But no one made eye contact, as if looking at me meant acknowledging what they had heard that morning. Except Zoe. Zoe, with her oversized sweaters and her nervous laughter and her habit of apologizing every time she breathed too loudly. She walked by my desk, pretending to drop off a report, but slipped a small post-it toward my keyboard. Her hand shook just a little. She did not wait for me to read it. She kept walking. When I turned it over, her handwriting stretched across the pink square in simple, blue ink. That was the bravest thing I've ever seen. I did not smile. I did not react outwardly at all, but I folded the note neatly and tucked it into my planner right behind the tab labeled Strategy, Q4, a place that mattered. A place where I kept plans I fully intended to bring to life. That night, Nashville buzzed with its usual late summer humidity. The air thick and warm, porch lights flickering across neighborhoods, crickets chirping louder than the traffic 2 blocks over. I sat on my balcony with a glass of red wine that I barely touched. My appetite had vanished hours earlier. Not for food, not for celebration, but for quiet. The quiet I had been chasing since the moment Jared first cut me off in a meeting 3 years ago. The quiet I lost every time I let someone else define my worth. Real silence. The kind that fills spaces where fear once lived. I thought of my dad. He used to say the best time to plant your feet is when someone tries to knock you off balance. A simple sentence. One he repeated after long days on construction sites when his shoulders ached and his boots were coated in dust. He worked outside for 30 years under the Tennessee sun, skin browned by heat and hardened by effort. He never understood corporate politics, but he understood justice. He understood standing your ground even when you were shaking. I remembered his hands, rough, calloused, warm. The way he taught me to drive in his beat-up Chevy that groaned every time we hit a hill. The way he watched me leave for college with a pride he hid beneath a fake cough. The way he said, "Make 'em earn your silence, not your voice. Your silence." I had given too much silence away. The next morning, I walked into the office and saw Jared's nameplate missing. Gone. Just an empty rectangle of adhesive residue and a faint outline where his title used to be. I stood there for a moment, not gloating, not triumphant, just absorbing the reality of absence. His office door open, his desk cleared, the place he guarded like a throne stripped down to carpet and dust. By noon, an all-staff email went out. Effective immediately, Jared R. is no longer with the company. Please direct all project queries to Rena Wallace. My name in bold. Centered. Clear. That was the first time I cried that week. Not because I won, but because I had carried the weight so long I forgot it was even heavy. Later that week, the company hosted a happy hour. I usually skipped them, choosing solitude over small talk. But this time, I went. Maybe out of curiosity. Maybe out of a need to see how the world adjusted around me. People approached me with a different kind of energy. Not admiration, not fear. Something closer to respect, something honest. They asked my opinion instead of explaining concepts I had created. They listened without interrupting, and when Sharon, one of the senior executives who always dressed perfectly and rarely showed emotion, leaned in close with her martini, glass balanced effortlessly between two fingers, she said, "That voicemail, that was surgical." I did not laugh. I did not say thank you. I simply took a sip of my soda and said, I had no choice. But I did. I had every choice. And I chose to speak, to expose, to let the truth echo louder than the shame he tried to plant in me. The Monday after Jared was fired felt like a season had changed, though nothing in the building itself looked different. Same glass walls, same humming lights, same corporate art that tried too hard to feel modern, but the air carried a different weight, lighter. Not cheerful, not relaxed, not even hopeful, just lighter. As if everyone had been holding a collective breath they did not know they were holding until the moment his badge stopped working. People walked through the hallways with that strange mix of caution and relief, the way someone moves after a thunderstorm breaks, slow, alert, but quietly grateful the worst is over. Conversations were quieter, footsteps softer. Even the elevator chimed differently, like the building had recalibrated its own heartbeat. His office door stayed open the whole day, not cracked open, wide open. Blinds rolled all the way up as if someone wanted to let the sun burn away what had been trapped inside. The room was almost disturbingly empty. Just a single dry erase marker left rolling on the desk and a forgotten stress ball with the company logo sitting on the window ledge. The air inside felt stale, like the ghost of arrogance was still floating around, waiting to be exhaled. I did not move in, not right away. I did not even wander close to the doorway as people passed by with half-curious glances. I kept working from my regular desk. Same ergonomic chair, same second-hand keyboard I bought after the old one broke, same small plant I kept forgetting to water. I did not ask for the corner office. I did not change my title on Slack, though 3 different people offered to help me update it. I did not touch anything that looked like a victory lap, but I noticed things shifting around me in ways I could not ignore. People started dropping by with questions they would have never brought to me before. Questions about strategy, about metrics, about long-term planning. Senior managers started adding me to meetings that Jared would have shoved me out of with a simple, "I'll loop you in later." Now there was no middleman, no interpreter, no gatekeeper diluting everything I said. My voice began to carry, not loudly, not dramatically, but naturally, like it had found room to stretch. And I noticed something else, something surprising in its simplicity. The men who used to speak to me with patient smiles, the kind reserved for interns and overeager temps, now paused before finishing their sentences. They waited. They asked. They listened. And the women who used to tighten their shoulders when Jared entered the room now relaxed when I walked in. They looked me directly in the eye, their voices steadier, their tone more open. It was not fear. It was not admiration. It was something quieter. Recognition. A subtle shifting of perception, as if they finally saw the version of me I had been trying to show for years. Zoe appeared again one afternoon, pink blazer, anxious hands twisting the sleeves, her hair pinned back in a way that suggested she'd redone it 3 different times before approaching me. "Rena, if you ever do want someone to help build out that mentorship proposal we talked about, I'd love to be involved." I looked up from my laptop and nodded once. "You're the first name on the list." She smiled like I had handed her a key to a locked room. A small glow in her eyes, soft and bright, like she finally believed she belonged here. That night, I stayed late, not because I needed to finish anything, but because I wanted the silence. The office after hours was its own kind of sanctuary. The lights dimmed automatically, the soft hum of the air conditioning steadier, more soothing. My computer screen was the only bright thing in the room. I opened the old campaign files, the ones Jared had butchered months earlier. He had swapped out copy, altered metrics, manipulated visuals to match the narrative he wanted, not because mine had been wrong, but because mine had been strong. Too strong. Strong enough that he felt threatened. The gaslighting had been subtle, so subtle that I had questioned myself. I remembered sitting at my desk staring at 2 versions of the same campaign, wondering if maybe his did flow better, if maybe I had been too detailed, too bold, too ambitious, if maybe he really was helping me shape a better product. But now, looking at the untouched drafts I had emailed myself for safekeeping, the truth was sharp enough to cut. He had not changed the work, he had changed the credit, swapped my initials in the doc metadata, forwarded it to the VP with his signature line attached, even rewrote the conclusion to match his speaking style, those clipped sentences he used when he wanted to sound decisive. I saved the original versions into a private folder I labeled Glass Truth, a name that felt right, transparent, fragile, reflective. Then I closed the laptop and sat in the dark, not thinking about revenge anymore. That part was done, finished cleanly, without any loose edges. I was thinking about what came after. What happens when you outlast the villain in your own story? What do you do with the space they once consumed? 2 weeks later, an email arrived inviting me to a Women in Tech panel in Austin. Claiming space without apology. The subject line alone made my heart beat faster. I almost said no. I never liked stages. I never liked applause. I never liked the idea of being looked at from a place elevated above others. Something about it felt unnatural, but something tugged at me, a small pull behind my ribs. I imagined a young woman sitting in the back row, hands trembling, wondering if she was imagining the ways she was being dismissed. I imagined her thinking she was crazy. I imagined her thinking she should just be grateful for a seat at the table. And something in me decided I could not let silence fill that seat again. So I went. I wore a simple navy suit, clean lines, nothing flashy. No makeup, but mascara. The kind of outfit that felt like armor without pretending to be something it was not. The room was full of warm lights and rows of faces watching with quiet expectation. The moderator introduced me with a short summary that made my chest tighten, not from pride, but from the surreal feeling of hearing my own story spoken aloud by someone else. When I told the story, I did not dramatize it. I did not embellish it. I did not sharpen the edges or soften the blows. I just said what happened, how the room fell silent when my voicemail played, how his arrogance collapsed under the weight of his own voice, how I did not raise mine, how I simply let him speak for the first time in front of people who actually mattered. The moderator asked, "How did you stay so composed?" I breathed in slowly, feeling all eyes on me, and said, "I didn't. I just stopped trying to be palatable." The room exhaled. A ripple of murmurs, some nods, a few soft gasps. I felt the truth land where it needed to. After the panel, a young woman approached, eyes red, mascara smudged, voice trembling. Her name was Lila, junior engineer, first job. She whispered, "They said I was overreacting, but now I know I'm not crazy." I hugged her, because no one hugged me when I was there. Back in Nashville, the office politics shifted in quiet waves. Jared's name became a ghost. People avoided saying it, avoided admitting they had once laughed at his jokes, avoided acknowledging they believed him. He became deleted, A file dragged to the trash and emptied without ceremony. And me? I kept my head down, did my work, built my team. The corner office stayed empty, always there, always waiting. I walked past it every day without stepping inside, not because I doubted I belonged there, but because I knew the moment had to mean something. It arrived on a Thursday. I saw Zoe training a new hire, speaking with a confidence that wrapped around the room like warm air. She held my old clicker in her hand, gesturing toward the screen like it belonged to her, like someone had finally unlocked her potential. And something settled in me, quiet, solid. I walked to HR. "Is that space still available?" I asked. Melissa looked up from her desk, a knowing smile stretching across her face. "Been waiting on you. Moving into that office did not feel like victory. It felt like reclamation. A slow, steady taking back of something that had been mine long before anyone else tried to claim it. The walls were the same sterile gray they had always been. The desk, the same modular wood surface with faint scratches at the edges. The window, the same wide sheet of glass overlooking the parking lot and the row of maple trees beyond it. Nothing about the physical space had changed, but I had. And that meant everything inside the room shifted too. The first thing I did was change the light bulbs. I unscrewed the cold white ones Jared preferred, the ones that made the office feel like a waiting room or an interrogation chamber, and replaced them with warm-toned bulbs I bought from a small hardware store down the block. Softer light filled the room, golden around the edges, gentler on the eyes. It made the space feel less like a battlefield and more like a place where someone could breathe. Then I took down the generic corporate clock and replaced it with one I found in a vintage shop on 8th Avenue. Brass hands, deep mahogany frame, silent movement, no tick-tick, no constant reminder that every second passing was another chance for someone to take credit for work that was not theirs. The silence of it felt intentional, like time belonged to me again. I brought only one framed photo, my dad with his arm around me at my graduation. We were both squinting against the Tennessee sun, the brightness so intense we looked almost washed out in the picture, but our smiles were unmistakable. He looked proud. I looked hopeful. I set it on the back corner of the desk facing me, not the door. It was a reminder of where I came from, not something meant to impress anyone who walked in. Every morning, instead of going to the shared coffee station, where small talk always felt like a chore, and where Jared used to hover like he owned every inch of the space, I made coffee at my desk, fresh beans, a hint of cinnamon, the smell rising in soft waves around me. That scent became its own kind of armor, familiar, grounding, mine. The company announced a restructure that month. Emails went out in a rush. Titles shifted across departments, responsibilities redistributed with the kind of language only corporate leadership could invent. But buried in the formal jargon, my new role appeared just like that, Senior Director of Brand Strategy. Same salary for now, but a different kind of power, not the kind handed down through approval, not the kind tied to someone's opinion of me. This was quieter, deeper, a role built on proof, on choices, on presence, and with it came something unexpected, a sense of responsibility that felt bigger than the job itself. I started hosting open sessions on Fridays. It was not some formal initiative. I did not send out fancy invitations or book a meeting room. I just left my office door open from 2 to 4 and told a few people they could stop by if they wanted. No agenda, no slides, no hierarchy. Just space. A place to be heard. The first week, only Zoe came. She hovered in the doorway before stepping inside, hands twisting the cuff of her blazer like she always did when she was nervous. She sat, talked, listened, and left with a little more steadiness in her voice. The second week, 5 more people showed up. Not all at once. In waves. Quiet, careful waves. By the 4th week, we ran out of chairs. People sat cross-legged on the floor, leaned against the door frame, stood near the window holding notebooks like shields. Stories began spilling out in ways they probably never had before. Ben from digital marketing said he had been shut out of key projects for months without explanation. Rita from HR admitted she had been denied training because someone had told her it was not urgent. Even the janitor, Mr. Henry, stopped by. He told me he used to clean Jared's office last every night because the energy in there felt wrong, heavy, mean. Listening to them, I felt something shift beneath the surface of the company. Not because I demanded it, not because I made speeches or called anyone out, but because people saw it was possible to speak, possible to exist in a space without apology, possible to trust someone without fearing the fallout. One afternoon, as I was grabbing tea in the break room, a woman I did not recognize approached me. She looked to be in her late 40s, sharp eyes, crisp blouse. She carried herself like someone who had seen too much to be impressed by titles. She said, "You don't know me. I work in legal. I just wanted to say, what you did, that was brave." I thanked her, but curiosity tugged at me. "What made you say that now?" I asked. She hesitated, eyes flickering toward the floor before settling back on mine. "Because someone played my voicemail once," she said quietly, "and I didn't fight back." I nodded, not out of pity or judgment, just acknowledgement. Her war had looked different, but the battlefield was the same. Late that night, long after most people had gone home, I stayed behind to clean out some old files in my new office. Papers stacked in crooked piles, folders with outdated labels, random supplies shoved into drawers without care. When I opened the bottom drawer, something slipped behind the wood and hit the back panel, thin, light. I reached in and pulled it out. A sticky note. Jared's handwriting. The ink was slightly smudged, like he had written it quickly. It had been tucked behind the drawer like a splinter waiting to be found long after the wound healed. It said, "Rena, don't take it personal. It's just business." I sat back in my chair and held the note between two fingers, half expecting it to burn through my skin. The handwriting was familiar, slanted, confident, careless. He had meant it as dismissal, a warning, a justification for all the ways he had taken what was mine. But to me, it became a reminder. This was not just business, this was my life, my name, my voice, my work. The next day, I scheduled a closed-door meeting with senior leadership. They filed in slowly, each carrying laptops and cautious expressions. I presented a proposal I had been shaping quietly for weeks. Anonymous reporting channel, third-party audits on promotion equity, quarterly listening sessions, not flashy solutions, not revenge, just systems, structure, foundation. Sharon raised an eyebrow, leaning back slightly in her chair. "You really want to make waves, huh?" she said. "Not waves," I replied. Foundation. The room was silent for a moment. Then heads nodded. Pens clicked. Approval passed around at the table like it had been inevitable. They approved the pilot. 6 months later, it became policy, and still, through all of it, I never once mentioned Jared by name. He texted me once, from an unknown number. The message was short. "You happy now?" I stared at the screen for a second before pressing delete. Did not reply. Did not block him. I did not need to. Some ghosts do not deserve fear. Just silence. That weekend, I drove to my parents' old house. The place had been empty since Dad passed the previous spring. Mom had gone 2 years before that. The house was unsold, sitting quietly on the land like it was waiting for someone to remember it. I walked through each room slowly, touching walls, opening cabinets, letting memories surface. The window over the sink still had the chip from when I threw a softball too hard at age 12. The hallway still creaked in the same two places. The living room still smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and old carpet. In the garage, I found my old debate trophy sitting crooked on a shelf. Dusty. Forgotten. Beside it was a cardboard box with a piece of masking tape labeled Rena in my dad's handwriting. Inside were cassette tapes, dozens of them. He had recorded every voicemail I ever left him in college, transferring them to tape, in case your phone ever gets wiped. I put one in the old player on the workbench. It was me, 19, crying, rambling about whether I should change my major because someone told me I didn't seem sharp enough for marketing. His voice followed. "You are more than sharp. You're the whole knife." I sat on the cold concrete floor, tape still spinning, and let the silence swell around me. Not because I was broken, but because I was healing. It's been a year now, a full year since the day that room fell silent, since the speakers betrayed his intentions instead of mine, since the world I thought I knew inside that building cracked open and showed me its real shape. Sometimes it feels like it all happened last week. Other times it feels like it lived in a different lifetime entirely. One tucked in the corners of conference rooms, hidden under fluorescent lights, wrapped inside the shaky breath I used to take before every meeting like a ritual of self-defense. But it still visits me sometimes. It comes back in flashes, in the tiny echoes of everyday life. When I hear a sudden beep in a quiet room and my chest tightens before my mind catches up. When I replay my own voice in recordings, checking tone and pacing, and I feel an involuntary flinch ripple through me like muscle memory from a past self. When someone compliments my strength and I feel something inside me pull back, unsure if the word fits or if it's just a reflection cast onto me by people who saw only the ending, not the middle. Because the truth is, I wasn't strong the whole time. I was tired, bone tired. The kind of tired that sits behind your eyes and whispers doubt into the edges of every thought. Afraid, too. Afraid of consequences. Afraid of missteps. Afraid of confirming the quiet assumptions people made when they looked at me and saw someone still climbing. Someone still proving herself. Someone still shaky on the inside even when the outside looked composed. There were nights when I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I was building a future or just delaying the inevitable collapse of something bigger than me, wondering if the truth was enough, wondering if my voice mattered in a world where louder ones drowned out the softer truths. But then I remember the moment his voice filled the speakers. Not mine, his. I remember how the air changed, how the silence shifted, how the room inhaled sharply as if collectively recognizing the truth they had been tiptoeing around but never naming. I remember the moment when every doubt that ever clung to my shoulders loosened its grip. The moment silence swallowed the room. Not for shame, not for pity, for truth. I remember standing there, grounded in a way I had never felt before, not shaking, not crying, not shrinking, just standing, claiming space, owning it, filling it, refusing to apologize for being there. Last month, the company hosted its first internal summit, a full-day event meant to celebrate the new structure, the improved culture, the growth we had earned rather than inherited. It was held at a hotel in Chattanooga, not far from where my parents had spent their honeymoon. A coincidence someone pointed out, but that felt more like a quiet, private blessing I didn't talk about. They asked me to be the keynote speaker. I almost said no. The word hovered at the edge of my tongue the moment the email arrived. I had learned over the years that no can sometimes be the scar tissue of too many stolen yeses. Yeses I'd given out of fear, out of obligation, out of the need to be seen as agreeable rather than true. But I've learned something important. Sometimes no protects you. Sometimes it traps you. And I didn't want to live inside that version of myself anymore. The version who shrank to fit someone else's comfort. So I went. I stood under the soft lights in a blue blouse and black jeans. No heels this time, no blazer, no armor. Just me. My voice. My truth. The lights warmed my shoulders, not harsh or blinding, just bright enough to remind me I was visible by choice, not by force. I opened with a story, not the one people expected, not about Jared, not about revenge, not about corporate politics. I told them about the first time I ever gave a speech, sixth grade assembly, the gym echoing with the restless noise of kids bored out of their minds, my hands shaking like leaves as I gripped the sides of the podium, how my voice cracked on the first sentence, how someone laughed in the bleachers, how my stomach dropped so fast I thought I might faint, and how my teacher pulled me aside afterward and said, "The most powerful people never raise their voice, they lower the room." That line stayed with me, through college, through interviews, through those years under Jared's shadow, Through every moment, someone tried to tell me my tone was too soft, my approach too gentle, my presence too quiet to matter. That's what I told them. You don't have to be the loudest to be heard, just the clearest, the most undeniable. The applause came soft at first, like people were feeling out the edges of the moment, then louder, then standing. A wave of sound that washed over me without knocking me down. I didn't feel overwhelmed. I didn't feel small. I just felt right, like I had stepped fully into the place I was meant to stand. Afterward, Zoe came up with her new intern, a girl barely 21, wide-eyed and eager. Zoe introduced me as the reason I never second-guess myself anymore. I didn't know what to say to that. Compliments like that used to sit uncomfortably on my skin, like clothes that didn't quite fit. So I just hugged her and said, then I did something right. Later that night, alone in my hotel room, I sat on the edge of the bed scrolling through old audio files I had never deleted. Files from years of work, recordings of meetings, drafts of pitches, and nestled between them was the original voicemail, the one Jared played. I hadn't deleted it. I don't know why. Maybe part of me kept it because it was real, raw, the version of me that existed when the world felt heavier than I could carry. Maybe it reminded me that strength isn't a constant state. It's a choice we keep making. I pressed play. My own broken voice filled the room, softer than I remembered, hurt deeper than I recalled. I expected to cringe, to flinch, to feel that sharp, shameful punch of vulnerability. But instead, something warm settled inside me. I listened all the way through. And when the message ended, I whispered, "You were doing your best." And for the first time, I believed it. Then I deleted it, not out of anger, not out of denial, but because that moment had already done its job. It had taught me what it needed to teach me. It had given me the doorway through which I walked into my own strength. I didn't need it anymore. He tried to use it to break me, but all it did was remind me how much I had survived. So, to whoever's listening now, whoever's sitting in a room thinking they're too quiet, or too soft, or too scared, or too tired, if someone plays your weakest moment, for a crowd, play their strongest lie right back. Because silence isn't always strength. Sometimes strength is volume, and sometimes it's vengeance. He played my voicemail to break me, so I played his to bury him. If this story struck a chord, hit like, subscribe, and tell me what you think in the comments.